I'll close in 1 second. Okay. On your camera 1, right?
We'll be all flat by this time.
Which way am I supposed to be facing?
No, you're supposed to face
The camera.
This board underneath it.
I know.
It's a weird place, huh?
Am I turning my mic on? Yeah, when you're ready.
Anytime you're ready.
Do we have a countdown?
You're on.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to CARP Chapter 36 Barrie and Surrounding Areas virtual meeting. My name is Gwen Cavanaugh, and I'm the chair of our chapter. And tonight, along with our Vice Chair, Beverly McGrath, we are honored to represent our members this evening in bringing this event to you. Also, special mention to fellow board member Leslie Polak, who has quarterbacked the technical crew for tonight's event. We have a very special presentation for you this evening, and I want to mention that following the presentation, there will be a question period. You will be able to ask questions using the chat button at the bottom of your screen. First, I want to thank our sponsors who made this evening possible. Thank you to 3B Solutions and to Michael Enterprises Audio and Visual. Their expertise is enabling us to stream this to you this evening. Thank you to John Tom from Superior Home Care for lending us his boardroom tonight. And a very special thank you to Steckley Gooderham Funeral Home for their support and their generous donation to assist with our costs. Finally, thank you to Jill Knowlton from PrimaCare Living for agreeing to bring this presentation to all of us this evening. Now I'm going to read Jill's bio because it's long. As Chief Operating Officer for PrimaCare, Jill is responsible for all aspects of the operation and transformational change, including organization, modernization, process improvement, results management, regulatory compliance, labor relations, and project management practices across the company's 3 long-term care homes and manage 4 others, including a new one they're building in Waterdown. Jill's demonstrated future-forward stewardship on issues of LGBTQ2 rights, medical assistance in dying, and resident rights has pushed PrimaCare to the forefront of the industry, garnering much media coverage, the respect of her peers, and keen public interest and support. An elected member of the OLTCA Board of Directors, Jill is frequently called upon to engage in collaborative projects with government, university, and healthcare partners. A master's level prepared registered nurse with a sincere hands-on approach, Jill Knowlton's impeccable reputation as an experienced visionary leader and highly effective executor in Ontario's long-term care sector is built on 35 years of unwavering dedication and firm commitment to providing high-quality, compassionate care and service to long-term care residents, ensuring each resident is supported to enjoy the life they choose. As a result, she has achieved consistently high levels of resident satisfaction across a spectrum of housing and program initiatives over the course of her career. As a vested stakeholder, Jill has successfully participated in the design, development, and launch of new long-term care homes and a range of seniors housing options within the province of Ontario. Jill, take it away.
Thank you, Gwen, very much for that very kind introduction. And thank you as well to CARP Chapter 36 Barrie for this opportunity to come and speak to you tonight about a very exciting proposal for a new development for a campus of care in Springwater, Barrie. Before we start, though, I would like to acknowledge that this meeting is taking place on the traditional land of the Anishinaabe people. The Anishinaabe include the Ottawa, Ojibwe, and Potawatomi nations, collectively known as the Three Fires Confederacy. We are dedicated to honoring Indigenous history and culture and committed to moving forward in the spirit of reconciliation and respect with all First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people. Also tonight, I'd like to recognize Orange Shirt Day, raising awareness about the residential school system and its traumatic intergenerational impact on First Nations and Indigenous peoples in Canada. And finally, I'd like to recognize International Seniors Day. Here we are tonight on the eve of Seniors Day tomorrow, and as we celebrate and value the significant contributions of older adults in our society. So thank you again for the opportunity to come and talk to everybody tonight about this exciting development for Springwater. When I say Springwater / Barrie, what I really mean is the development will be on the Springwater side of the border, but right really on the line of Barrie. So please bear with me if I interchange Springwater with Barrie. Tonight is really an opportunity also to introduce everyone to the butterfly model. Butterfly model, you've seen a lot of it in the media. There's been a lot of press over the summer months around butterfly, but I still have people asking me exactly what is butterfly and how do you get to butterfly. And so really tonight I'll talk to you about the components and the principles of the model, and then I'll talk to you about how we plan to implement those principles into our new development in Springwater. So first of all, we're looking at developing a 192-bed long-term care home in Springwater as part of a campus of care. A campus of care has numerous elements to it. They are connected. So we'll have the long-term care home, we'll have the health hub, which will include adult day services, other diagnostic space, lab space, clinical space, social and cultural space as well. And then additional housing, other seniors housing, everything from assisted living through to independent seniors apartments. So it's quite a large development. And the interesting piece here is that it will be a bespoke butterfly home. And when I talk about butterfly, there's really two key elements that we always have to remember. It's about small household design with emotion-focused care, and you really cannot separate those two. The model of care, you must have a coherent model of care to support that small household design. Sometimes we get talking about focus on design and understanding design, and we don't always have that overlay or that implementation of that coherent model of care. And really, the two cannot exist without each other. They really are entwined and must be talked about together. So before I begin, I'll just introduce our company, PrimaCare Living Solutions. We have 3 owned homes in Ontario for 480 beds. We also manage an additional 4 long-term care homes for other owners, but we are the managers of those homes for another 428 beds. And then we have a new award, a 192-bed long-term care home in a campus of care development in the butterfly model that's being designed and will be developed in Waterdown, so just in the Hamilton area. And that was part of the 2018 bed awards and that initial 5,000 beds that was released. So we're actively working on that development right now. We have over 30 years experience operating long-term care homes. We are focused on an innovative design and care model, the butterfly model of care, in our existing owned homes, our 3 owned homes. We have actively implemented the butterfly model in 2 of our existing homes, and our 3rd home, Burton Manor in Brampton, was to have started in January, got a little paused with COVID. But on October 7th, next week, we will be having our initial launch of the Butterfly Project. So they will be undergoing the cultural transformation into a butterfly home. So we will actually then have 3 retrofitted butterfly homes. We also were successful in receiving quite a substantial grant from the Center for Aging and Brain Health at Baycrest to study virtual reality. Virtual reality is common. You can, buy the headsets and whatever, but we didn't want to look at it just as entertainment or for social purposes. We wanted to look at virtual reality as a therapy. So with our researchers at Western University, Dr. Karen Campbell and Dr. Diane Bryant, we engaged in a very large funded study. It will be published shortly. It was a full randomized controlled trial using virtual reality as a therapy. And the outcome of that study, we have just finished that at the end of 2019, is really that virtual reality does have an impact on people's mental health, on people's well-being, We were able to show some reduction in the use of medications, some reduction in the use of behaviors, some increased appetite and increased socialization through the use of virtual reality. So anytime we can use a therapy, something like virtual reality, and stay away from some of the more dangerous things that might be in our toolbox, such as harmful medications, it's a positive thing, and it helps us normalize living for our residents, and in addition with providing some peace of mind and some confidence with our family members. And finally, we are actively in year 2.5 of the 3-year project with the Registered Nurses Association of Ontario to become best practice spotlight organizations, and that's implementing best practice guidelines, so evidence-based practice in our care and services. And we're at 2.5 years, so by March we hope to be through that and be actually awarded our designation as a best practice spotlight organization. And we're very happy to say that we have a 95% satisfaction rating with our residents and our families. Whoops, sorry. So the project that we're going to talk about tonight is for Springwater Barrie, as I mentioned. I will also be explaining to you what it is to be a butterfly. And when I say be a butterfly, that's important. Words are important. We don't do butterfly. We don't apply butterfly. We are butterfly. Person-centered care, person-centered approaches. We are person-centered. We don't do person-centered. So that's an important point. I'm going to talk to you about why bother. Why is this even important? Why are we looking at culture transformation in long-term care? This is a very intense project. This is a very challenging model to implement, and why bother? You know, we could just keep going the way we are, but I'll talk to you about some of the important points there. Environmental changes. I'll be able to show you a little bit of a butterfly home. I brought some slides tonight, and we'll talk about the look. So one of the things I really want to emphasize though with you is that it's easy in the butterfly model because the colors are so vibrant, the changes are so significant that you notice, you remark when you go into a butterfly home. But that's probably about 5% of being butterfly. Being butterfly really is more about our next point, emotion-focused care. It is a culture transformation. Again, it's not something that you do. It's not a program that's layered over top. This is a 1-year, really intense culture transformation project that has a really detailed and well-structured change management plan to support it. We understand now better than ever, coming out of that wave 1 of COVID in the spring and early summer, the issues in long-term care. We talk about the toxic nature of the culture in long-term care. Butterfly works to change that culture and to shift that culture to more of a person-centered approach where we look at residents, families, and staff being a triad and being entwined together. And you cannot separate those 3 pieces from one another. They must be considered together. And we aren't, as staff person-centered and residents person-centered and family person-centered. The triad is person-centered together. And we always consider any decisions we make, any communications that we may have, any policy changes, any sort of change in the home, amongst those across that triad, and ensure that the triad is involved in those decisions. We'll also talk about staff changes and nurturing our staff's emotions. Changing culture is very challenging, and for staff to be able to step out of that toxic culture is really difficult, and it's really easy to get pulled back into it. So you don't just sort of get to the end of the year and say, okay, we're going to be accredited for butterfly. We did everything we had to do. We've passed everything. Now we've got, we can hang the butterfly plaque on the wall. This will go on for years and years and years, requiring recharges, re-education, additional support. It is easy to get pulled back. So a lot of focus on nurturing our staff through this. We focus on being with the resident and supporting the family. And again, through COVID, I think through that first wave, we learned a lot. When our doors were closed to visitors, to us, again, consider the triad, we lost 1/3 of our team. And that's tough. If you're a team and a third of your bench is missing, you're not as strong. We really missed our families, and we opened our doors earlier to welcome them back, and we will do everything in our power to maintain our families with us. We recognize the supports that they provide, but also the strengths that they bring to our team, and the very necessary presence that we need in our home. I'll also talk to you about that change management plan that I spoke about. Again, it's a very detailed, structured plan, and I'm emphasizing that because this is not something that you undertake lightly. This is something that needs to be in your strategic plan. You really have to map this out well, because this really does take a lot of effort and a lot of resources to engage, but it is worth it. Managing regulatory and other risks. I get asked a lot, how do you do this, Jill? You've got a very prescriptive act. You've got one of the most prescriptive acts in the Long-Term Care Homes Act, prescriptive piece of legislation that there is. How do you manage this? It is actually very easy. One of the things we did very early on with some colleagues at the Region of Peel was map the regulations over to the butterfly requirements. And there were about 400 things that had to be mapped over, and there were exactly 6 pieces where we had to look for a workaround. So very, very minimal, and butterfly certainly does really allows you to really advance in terms of regulatory compliance. And finally, we're really going to focus on this Willow Creek Manor, which is what we're calling our new development in our home in Springwater. Keep going the wrong way. Okay, so our proposal for Springwater then is a 192-bed long-term care home, and we call that the anchor of the development. It's a broad spectrum campus of care, and I already talked to you about the other elements. There will be a health hub for adult day services, and adult day services do not just have to be day services. They can run around the clock if necessary. There may be other clinical care, primary care, diagnostic and lab space, and then community space for programs and socializations. We have a very important partnership in this project, and that's with BANOC, the Barrie Area Native Circle. It's an Indigenous culture partnership, and 2 of the households, so 2 of the small households, will be culturally designated to Indigenous people, and that's a wonderful opportunity within the butterfly model. And as I move further along in the presentation, you'll see that the butterfly model really does lend itself very well to cultural programs. Other amenities, a hair salon, lab, pharmacy, pub, community gardens, library, laundry, dining will be included, and it will also be a research and innovation hub. There are very few butterfly homes in Ontario. In fact, our home in St. Catharines, Henley House, is only the 2nd fully accredited butterfly home in Ontario, behind the Region of Peel's Malton Village, and our home in London, Henley Place, is just going to be receiving its accreditation as the 3rd fully accredited butterfly home in Ontario, likely in October. So there isn't a lot of butterfly. There are other homes that are undergoing this transformation right now in Ontario, but it's still largely local pockets of innovation. And, we need to really consider that and how we can move this and scale this forward. So this becomes more of the norm and not just, again, these local pockets. So this development will be a research hub. We expect that our researchers from Western University, again, Dr. Campbell and Dr. Bryant, who have already started crafting a research proposal for outcomes on our existing butterfly homes, will be very interested in this home in terms of furthering that research. Benefits then. It provides care close to home. It creates a service continuum. And anytime we can create a service continuum, really what we're doing is looking at aging in place and trying to prevent early institutionalization. I think one of the things that has really bothered me throughout my career is that long-term care, when we speak about long-term care, our immediate reference point is a building. It's bricks and mortar, bricks and sticks, where we have to start really expanding our view of long-term care and the definition of long-term care. we're going to be building some new long-term care beds in Ontario, but when you look at the demand and the population growth for the age categories that will be needing long-term care services, we likely would have to build about 100,000 beds, and that's just impossible. We wouldn't be able to build that, and we certainly wouldn't be able to staff it. We need to look at long-term care differently. So how does that definition shift to be able to provide services really that keep people out of long-term care? And again, I often think that that's the indicator that we should be tracking, not how many people are on the wait list waiting to get in and how many people actually get into long-term care, but how many people can we successfully keep out of long-term care and maintained in their own homes. And that is the beauty of a campus. It does have the anchor of a long-term care home for those people that really need it. But that health hub with the adult day services and some other care aspects to it, even some social space for peer support groups, is extremely important. That alone can provide long-term care level services, but then people go home at the end of the day. And I think if we're all honest, and if you asked any of us, where would most of us want to be? We really want to be in our own home. So how do we do that with the services and use the strength and the amount of a service that can be provided out of that long-term care home to effectively keep people in their own homes? In addition, a campus of care has other seniors housing. So it can have assisted living. It can have independent apartments. It can have a whole range of other housing. Again, people are in a community, can use the services and use those services well to actually stay out of, deinstitutionalize, to stay out of institutions. We want to support seniors to be healthy and to be independent. And we want to reduce social isolation and promote increased social participation across the lifespan. A campus can do that beautifully. I think we've learned a lot about isolation through the COVID months and how damaging isolation can be. And again, within a campus, you can live independently, but you've got people around you who are looking out for you, who would ask for you if they didn't see you. You can get supports if you need it, so that you can remain as independent as possible in your own home. I've already talked about the Research and Innovation Center or hub that this will create for the area. It will also provide employment. It's about 300 jobs that will be brought to the area. And it will also be a living classroom. We've worked with Georgian College to develop a partnership to put a living classroom in the long-term care home. And it will be unique because it will be a butterfly living classroom. So our PSWs, our registered staff, other levels of care providers will be schooled or educated on site in the butterfly model. And it's a great opportunity then to transition right from where you're doing your taking your classes, doing your placement work, right into regular and ongoing employment. It's a win-win. It's a great opportunity for the students, and it's a great opportunity for the home to have a workforce that knows the site, that knows the residents, knows the other staff, and can transition directly into employment. For the community, it will increase the tax base. It's also a tremendous opportunity for both internal and external volunteerism, and it's a great opportunity then to give back to the community as a butterfly home. I keep going backwards. So being a butterfly really is about dementia care. When you say butterfly, people immediately think of dementia care. But the point I want to make here is that good dementia care, the principles of good dementia care are really just the principles of good care for all. About being connected, about using emotional intelligence, about working together, connecting with residents at the place that they're at in their journey, about being confident to make decisions, about being self-directed as a staff member. That's what being a butterfly is. And that's just really good care for anyone. So what is a butterfly? Butterfly is a social interaction model that's been implemented in numerous homes in Europe, Australia, the US, and Canada, not very many in Ontario. And it is never lost on me that we don't have calls from people from all around the world to come to Ontario to look at our long-term care offering. We have a lot of buildings that typically look like boxes, warehousing type approach for older adults, and we just don't have people wanting to flock to see the innovation around that, because it isn't actually very innovative. We tend to get on planes pre-COVID, when we could travel, and go to certain areas of the world, Denmark, Sweden, certain areas within Japan, to look at the innovation in their long-term care housing. That doesn't happen the opposite way, and I've sort of a point that's never lost on me. So again, when we have this opportunity now to build new long-term care beds, and a huge investment by our provincial government, $1.75 billion in that development to fund the building of those beds, the development of those beds, this is the time to really ask ourselves, who are we building for, and what are we building? And we have to recognize that these new homes will have 35-year licenses, so a 35-year lifespan. So we're not just building for this generation or the next generation or the generation after. It could even be the generation after that. So we really need to be looking forward. And right now, with the design standards the way they are, they're 2015, but really they were largely written and developed in the late 90s, early 2000s. It's really a rear view approach. We need to challenge ourselves to what do these buildings need to look like to be able to provide good care and to be able to support people to live well, to support people in their well-being going forward. And again, it's multiple generations that we're looking forward, and we shouldn't be looking backwards. The effect of well-being is really felt by both staff and by residents. We know the challenges that we've had with Health Human Resources, again, magnified through COVID. We lose the most number of staff in the first 1 to 3 years because, again, it's typically a toxic culture. It's a very demanding job. It's a struggle to get full-time work. The work that you're coming into typically is not what you thought you were stepping into when you thought about what type of career or what type of work you wanted to do in a caregiving role or in a caregiving profession. That really shifts very quickly when you step into a long-term care home. And we really have to challenge ourselves and step back and look at that. We need our staff to do well so that our residents do well and so that our families do well. We want our staff to say they have a feeling of well-being. And how are we measuring that right now? We're really looking at 3 different things. We're looking at staff absenteeism, we're looking at staff turnover, and we're looking at staff injury. And we're measuring that right now as we're implementing the butterfly model and looking to see whether we're making positive movements in those areas as a measure of staff well-being. So the care approach then in a butterfly model really is an approach that responds to people in a human dignified way rather than in an objectified manner. A lot of what we do in long-term care is highly objectified. I talk about the lists all the time. When you walk into a long-term care home, there's a lot of lists. So you're on the bath list, you're on the BM list, you're on the nutritional supplement list, you're on the foot care nurse list, you're on the doctor's list. There's all sorts of lists that you're on, but you sort of forget that you're a person. And so because the legislation is so prescriptive, a lot of the day is organized around these lists. And I'll just give an example. So in the legislation, there's a requirement that everyone has an opportunity for 2 baths or 2 showers a week, and then you can be involved in terms of what time of day and what day of the week. So Jill Knowlton might be Tuesday and Friday at 4 o'clock for a bath. So every Tuesday and Friday, I'm pretty sure I'm going to get my bath. But what if I don't want a bath at 4 o'clock on a Tuesday or Friday? What if I'm kind of busy or I'm doing something else or I want to watch TV and I don't want a bath? Well, pretty much you got to stick to the list because there's other people on the list. In Butterfly, we work really hard to get rid of the lists where the staff are empowered to work directly with the resident. They know the resident really, really, really well. They know the resident's family really, really well. So they know what a resident responds to. And typically what happens is you exceed the regulations. So just as an example, if we talk about baths, there's a resident in one of our homes and he happens to have some disruptive behavior at certain points in time in the day. One of the things you'll learn about Butterfly, I'll speak about it a little bit as we go along, as we reduce the use of harmful antipsychotic medications. This resident's PSW knows that he responds really well to a nice warm bath. So when this resident happens to get agitated or a little bit distressed or a little bit upset, we don't give medication. What does this PSW do? He takes this resident for a nice warm bath. And so when you look at the end of a 7-day period of a week, this resident might have had a bath 7 days a week. And he's had a bath when he's needed a bath or when he's wanted a bath, not based on this list. So when we talk about objectified care or objectified approach, we're driven by these lists and these tasks versus what is the resident telling us? And if that resident happened to need that bath at midnight because it would calm that resident so that they could get in bed, not only go to sleep, but stay in bed so that they have good restorative sleep, we would give that bath at midnight. This is this culture transformation that the staff go through where they're empowered to make those decisions for their residents and with their residents. And that's how well they know their residents. They meet them where they're at in their journey. So some of the principles of Butterfly then are being person-centered. The whole organization is person-centered. I can't be person-centered and my colleague not be person-centered. And we are person-centered together. And again, I spoke about this earlier. We don't do person-centered. We don't do person-centered care. We are person-centered. So we really have to know ourselves, and we have to make sure that our words and our actions and our feelings and beliefs really do illustrate person-centeredness. Feelings matter most. So we return care and services to outcomes based on emotional care first. Again, we look at indicators, we collect data on indicators that are quite different than the indicators that we are required to report on. Some of the provincial indicators, for example, we want to look at how well a resident does throughout the day. How well did the resident eat? Well, how much weight did they lose? Did they need nutritional supplements? We sort of measure it that way. We also track our use of antipsychotic medications. One of the important points with Butterfly is that we reduce our use of antipsychotic medications to under 10%. So again, I'm going to declare when we started our project at our first home, we were at 57.9% usage of antipsychotic medication. Antipsychotics have a role for certain people that may have certain medical needs or have a certain diagnosis. But for the general population, they are quite unsafe. And it is, again, when I walk onto a home area, it is never lost on me, sort of the lineup of people in chairs, usually with their heads down, looking at their feet and not engaging in life. When you remove those medications and you lift that drug fog, I call it a drug fog, people can engage in their lives. When we first undertook this, it's quite a scary concept. And many people said to me, Jill, you better be prepared for this because it's going to be chaos. There is going to be behaviors all over the place. It's going to be dangerous. We had to work a lot with our families because, again, our families are consenting and giving permission for these changes in care. And it's frightening for them because it's a big change. So we had worked through those things together. And when those medications are removed, guess what happened? Zero responsive behaviors. It's really interesting because what else has changed? Our PSWs, our housekeepers, our dietary aides, our recreation aides, our PT aides know our residents so well. They know how to interact and relate with the resident, meet them in the journey at the place that they're at in their journey. They know what it takes to have a successful day with that resident. So we're at the point now where on our care plans, we are not even recording behaviors. So if you opened up my care plan, for example, previously to the Butterfly, it might have said Jill Knowlton, spits, bites, hits, scratches when she's, when somebody comes up behind her and she's startled. So those are not nice behaviors to have, and that's what might have described me. But that doesn't describe who I am. That's not a strength-based care plan. So we've worked hard to remove those behaviors from care plans and really look at our residents as the people that they are with full respect for the persons that they are. And our care plans then become strength-based care plans. And really how we again, how well our staff know the resident and how well we're able to manage that environment and manage that day, manage the risk in the day, for example, really contributes to the success, and removing those medications and those behaviors not appearing. And I do just want to mention one thing. Through COVID, butterfly homes were challenged as well. We had some COVID in our homes, and we were under strict directives. We were under guidance from public health. We had Chief Medical Officer of Health had issued directives. Residents were put into their rooms. They were on trace service. They were confined to their rooms. That's very challenging in a butterfly home, where really we're connecting with people. Touch is very important. I've just said, feelings matter most. There's a lot of human connection in a butterfly home. So this is really difficult. And when I got the data came in for our indicators at the end of June, so sort of the end of wave 1 of COVID, I sort of had to steady myself before I even opened up the file to look at it, because I thought, oh boy, we're probably taking giant steps backwards. But I was really interested in, and what I saw when I did that night that I took a look at that data. We had in our home in London, Henley Place, in those 3 months, those really tough early months of COVID, 0 responsive behaviors. In our home in Henley House, St. Catharines, again, really tough months. We had exactly 3 responsive behaviors in 3 months. So again, even with these sort of the artificial environment that COVID introduced into a long-term care home, with people having to be distanced and in their homes and staff masking, the staff still were able to connect and to understand and work with their residents so that they had, again, a successful day. We did not have chaos erupt. We did not make a big step backwards. The indicator, most interestingly, that did change, and did change dramatically, was staff satisfaction. Staff became highly dissatisfied with that artificial type of environment, because going through this culture change and passing through this year and learning these new principles and this new culture, new way of working and being with residents and being with families. Remember, we lost our families too. This caused a lot of distress to them. This is not the way they see care to be. This is not why they are caregivers. And so it caused a lot of distress with them. So we've been working on recharge to get our staff back into the butterfly and our residents into much more sort of normalized living now. So I thought those are a couple of interesting points coming out of COVID. Family-like care, and I just talked about it again, with losing our families was very significant for us when we had to close our doors, and we welcomed our families back early, and we're doing everything that we can to maintain our families on site at this point. And again, emotional labor, recognizing that staff to receive person-centered care and support. Staff are equally as important as our residents. New culture staffing. So developing staff as new leaders. So in a butterfly home, we don't call our staff, we call them family members. And they form a family in the small households with residents. And when you walk into a butterfly home or butterfly household, the staff's photos are on the walls with the residents' photos. No different than if you walked into my home and you would see my family's photos on the walls, because we're all just a family together, and we go through our day together as a family. So when we have meals, when we have lunch, for example, the housekeeper, the dietary aide, the PSW sits down and has lunch at the dining table with our residents, because it's lunchtime. New culture staffing also includes a ratio of 1 to 5. And again, people say to me, okay, Jill, within the existing funding, we don't know how you're doing that. How do you meet 1 to 5? Again, it's new culture. We don't look at our home action team or our household as just our clinical staff, our PSW staff, or our registered staff. It's our housekeeper, it's our dietary aide, it's our recreation aide, it's our PT or physiotherapy aide. It's the entire team together that forms the home action team. And we actually do better than a 1 to 5 ratio. Our housekeeper knows our residents as well as the PSW, and we'll sit down and have lunch with the resident. We'll sit down and engage in an activity with the resident. We'll sit down and talk with the resident's family as much as our registered staff or our PSW staff would do. Emotional intelligence is really the core competency here. When we look at hiring as well, shifting some of the questions and the way that we hire so that we're hiring for emotional intelligence. We can read resumes, we can see where people graduated from, we can check that, we can go through our due diligence, but we really want to understand whether you can engage using emotional intelligence in a butterfly home area. It's not for everyone. And that doesn't mean that you are, good, bad, or ugly because this just isn't right for you. It just means that butterfly home area is not the right place for you to be working. It's interesting when we interview people in this new approach and we use a box of stuff, we call it the stuff of life, and we put it on the table or in the center of the room, and we ask the candidate for the job to tell us a little bit about themselves, to tell us something that really made them sad in their life, to tell them something that really made them very happy in their life, and then we ask them to, look at the things that we have in this box and to do something with it. About half the people will not be able to do anything with it. And again, that you may be a great nurse, you may be a great housekeeper, you might be a great PSW. It just means that this role in a butterfly household is not quite right for you. But the other half, it's interesting. Some of people will just really get engaged and will do all sorts of stuff. They'll almost put out a whole show or display for you. And others will sort of engage in it. So those are the people that we're interested in, people that can really open up and talk about their feelings, talk about themselves, and then not feel that it's silly or ridiculous to do something with these things that we have in the box. That's really what you need to do, because again, when we're working with our residents, it's not that list approach, that structure approach. It's where are we at in our day? It's 10 o'clock on a Sunday morning. Maybe we just want to continue having breakfast and read the paper and finish our coffee together. We might be at the dining table from 8 in the morning till 10:30, well, because that's what we want to do today. It's really moving away again from that very structured approach, and then action-based, committing to achieving increased quality of life as the main quality indicator. So why bother? We know that people living with dementia is a population that is really expected to double in the next few years, and will be a significant population that will require our care and supports. And there are more people living with dementia in long-term care. So again, it's around that aging population and also dementia. And then also when you look at Springwater and Barrie, it's about demand. So we know that there's demographic pressure in this area. We know we need about 600 long-term care beds today to meet that pressure. We know that we've got a population that's greater than 75 years and above. And that typically is the population that needs the supports of long-term care or of senior services in a campus. There's a very long average wait time for a basic bed of about 7 years. And there's about 1,000 people on the wait list today for this particular area. Alternate level of care, ALC rates are high in this area, with the number of people waiting in hospital and taking a hospital bed and waiting in hospital to find their home in long-term care. Median wait time can be up to 220 days for a long-term care bed, and there is about a 70% crisis admission rate. And sometimes residents have to travel outside of their home communities and away from their families to find a long-term care home. The other piece really that COVID brought to light is something that I really wasn't talking about before COVID is around safety. And typically when I would talk about butterfly, I talk about well-being. I talk about staff well-being, I talk about resident well-being, but really we have to look at safety as well. So, COVID illuminated a number of problems particularly in our aging or our older long-term care homes. Butterfly, again, in design, builds to smaller households. So when you have smaller households, again, 16 people or less in a household, you have fewer people interacting together. And because the households have a staff that are called family, the staff do not move. Even within the home, the staff don't move. When you're part of a home action team, you stay in your home. So you have a smaller number of people interacting together. You have the ability to close off these small households in a sort of a zonal approach. So if you think about HVAC, airflow, whatever, you can close off these smaller households so that air isn't being shared by a large number of people. And you have a reduced number of people touching things, preventing cross-contamination. In existing homes, you've got a large number of people sharing a dining room together. One room, you know, if it's a newer home, one room, 32 people coming into a dining area to eat. That's a lot of potential for cross contamination there. When you have a butterfly household, the smaller households, each household has its own small dining room, has its own domestic kitchen, has its own laundry, has its own small living spaces. So again, you've got people living more like a home in a smaller household and not engaging with a larger number of people when you can have that sort of cross contamination occurring. In addition, when you look at designing these small households, sort of the services that come into the household can be organized outside of the household when you do it smart. So things like picking up laundry bags to go to the main laundry. You can do that from outside, from, you know, panels that open outside the household. So you're not bringing people from outside the household into the household. That creates safety because, again, you've got fewer people interacting. The households have open access to natural outdoor areas, and this cannot be understated. This is really a key principle in Butterfly, is that nature and outdoors is restorative, and it increases our ability to feel better about ourselves, and it contributes overall to our health. When you look at some homes that are designed, and two of my homes have this, I admit it, they were homes that were built in the early 2000s that have interior courtyards. So interior courtyards, I call them prison yards, because you're in a cement area, you've got brick walls usually around you, and it's like being in a prison. Butterfly really requires open access to nature and to natural outdoor areas. So when we look at designing the outdoor space outside of our households, they're not in a courtyard approach. It's open pathways, now very carefully fenced, clearly for safety, but open pathways and ability to move around in nature and to spend time outside. And we spend time outside in a butterfly home area 4 seasons of the year. We don't close off our outdoor areas because it's winter or because it's a colder day. Outdoors is extremely important. We have walking routes throughout the larger campus that have queuing and that have anchoring points in them. Again, when you have this sort of loop approach, or this interior courtyard with a loop going around, we know that actually to be really dangerous. People get very exhausted going around and around and around in a loop, and typically you're looking for something to anchor yourself to. And when you can't see it because you're in a loop, typically people get fatigued and falls can occur, or you just get lost. So you want to create walking areas that are not in that going around in circles approach, but that creates pathways that have anchors. And Butterfly uses color blocking. I'll show you some of those colors shortly. Very vibrant colors, but you know that you need to get to the pink area. You know you need to get to the purple area, or I belong in the blue area. It's anchoring me, and if I'm on the path and I can see the blue ahead, I know I keep moving ahead. I know that that's where I'm supposed to be. It's really an interesting phenomenon when you visit a butterfly home and you see people doing this. You see people knowing that they belong in the pink area, and they don't go outside the pink area because my area is the pink area. So color is extremely important. And then finally, around safety, culturally appropriate. Butterfly lends itself to cultural units extremely well, because again, it meets the resident where they are in their journey. So if it's an Indigenous household, if it's a South Asian household, again, it's designed around the needs for that population, and it doesn't put people on lists or tell you what you need to do or do things to you. You are part of the daily living. You are guiding and directing what's happening on a day in and day out basis. So how did we get here? How did PrimaCare get here? I will tell you, in 2016, I sat down and I looked at our own operations. I looked at our own homes, and there was one night I walked down a home area before I went home, and I almost put my hands over my ears. The noise, people milling around, some of the behaviors that I saw, and I just thought, we can do a heck of a lot better than this. And so I was looking at our data. We were seeing escalating incidents of behaviors and injuries. We were heavily investing in programs. And one of the things I learned when I did this evaluation is that we were spending a lot of money, and sometimes the government's money, to do this, but we were layering programs like this. So it's like the pancake approach. And eventually you get up here and it all falls apart. And nothing stuck. We continued to have a highly dissatisfied resident and family population. We had a lot of staff absenteeism. We had a lot of staff injury. And we were doing gentle persuasive approach. We were doing other dementia programs, but we were looking at them as programs. And what we didn't realize was this toxic culture that was underlying it remained the same. So it all got pulled back to that. It wasn't until we looked at doing something, transforming that culture, that we really started to make some steps forward. We had confined spaces. We had locked home areas. One of the things with Butterfly is you don't lock things. It's part of balancing risk. People don't live behind locked doors. Every cupboard is not locked. Every appliance is not locked up. In a Butterfly home area, we have kettles out. We have toasters out. We have cabinets that you can open and look at what's inside of them. We had a lady, a resident, who liked to iron, and typically, we would have locked that iron up unless a staff member was right with her to use that, or we did something else that wasn't too smart. We cut the cord off and we set her up with her ironing board and the iron with the cord off and some shirts, and we said, okay, you want to iron, you go right ahead and iron. She took that iron and she threw it over her shoulder, and it went through a plate glass window. She wanted to iron, and she knew that the iron needed to be hot. And so again, it's not about eliminating risk, but balancing risk. So now, as we moved along with this particular resident, she would plug her iron in and she would iron her shirts. She didn't burn herself. She didn't iron. She didn't burn herself. She didn't burn anybody else. She was happy. She was perfectly happy, and she was very satisfied with the work that she was doing in the day. So we don't have confined spaces. We don't lock things up. We want staff and residents to be able to make a piece of toast, to boil the kettle, to make a cup of tea, to use the microwave, for example, to go in the fridge and get something to eat and heat it up if you want to. We don't take those things away. And we also had a very high use of antipsychotic medications. And I've already spoken about that tonight, but again, really significant when you look at a movement from 57.9% usage of antipsychotic medications down to 8%. It's very easy for that number to go the other way. And I'm seeing that through COVID. It was moving the wrong way. So a lot of action and activity occurring to bring that back down, to lift that drug fog. But again, my own organization in 2016, this was part of the evaluation, the results of the evaluation, and we just knew we needed to do something. We knew we could do better. So we read the literature, we made contact with various organizations around the world, we consulted with the region of Peel, Malton Village. We're really closely aligned with our colleagues there. They had started a little bit ahead of us. We looked at our own internal abilities and resources, and we strategically aligned with Meaningful Care Matters to be our partner to support us in this culture transformation. Pressures then on long-term care. Funding hasn't kept up with the increase in the complexity of care. Staff are not trained to manage the underlying causes of behaviors. Long-term care culture is focused on completing tasks. Remember, we've talked about the lists. Sterile clinical environments do not support well-being, and inspections prioritize process over physical well-being. And when I talk about that, so process really being outputs, okay, so baths, again, that example back to the bath, the inspections is around, did you get your 2 baths on the days that you had identified and you're on the list for? No, well then you're non-compliant. But what is the outcome? If you look at how we turned it around, the outcome is that particular resident that I used as the example got 7 baths a week, maybe even more if he wanted. Didn't have to be during the day. It could be any time of the day or night. And then didn't use antipsychotic medications either. So that's an outcome. So looking at well-being versus just an output. So staff, again, we talk about the toxic culture. Staff are very focused in the current approach to tasks and lists. We see a high level of stress amongst our staff. And people living with dementia live in boredom. And you know, I've talked to you earlier about, you know, just seeing people staring down at the floor. You know, people are not engaged. People are not engaged in their lives and in the day. And that can lead to some of these behaviors, perhaps, that might happen. And it can lead to hospitalization. It can lead to weight loss. It can lead to all sorts of really sort of negative health effects. And it can lead to confinement, us having to put you into a locked area, a locked home area, because of some of your behaviors. So the result, high costs. You know, what's the cost of using those antipsychotic medications? What's the cost of staff absenteeism? The reliance on really expensive behavioral support units. Those units are expensive to build and they're expensive to operate. And what we've found with our colleagues at Region of Peel is that we can provide care for residents who would have gone to a BSU, a behavior support unit, very, very well in a butterfly household. High ALC rates, so high alternate level of care residents, patients in hospital, because they don't qualify for a long-term care home because perhaps they have some behavior or whatever, and inability to implement evidence-informed best practices, because best practice always says start with the non-pharmacological approaches first before you move on to anything else. So we needed to do a big culture change. Decide on the model of care. You need to have a coherent model of care. It is as important as the physical environment. We have chosen Butterfly, but there are others. There's Eden, there's Greenhouse. You could create a hybrid model. The point here is that you are implementing emotion-focused care. You have to use a very detailed, structured change management plan. You can't just do Butterfly or do emotion-focused care. It is a change in culture. We have to be Butterfly. We have to educate and communicate with our stakeholders, and we have to do that over and over and over. When we start this process, it's frightening for families even. You would think, oh, everybody would want to do this. This is exciting. This is the direction we should be going. But it's a big change, and it's a change from what you know. So there can be some fear involved there, and perhaps some concern that the resident may not be as safe. Oh, how can you take those medications away? How can you put people like that together? We really have to work hard with our families around that. And initially, we meet with our families almost on a daily basis, and then we continue on with a weekly meeting with our families. Double the time estimates. This does not take a short amount of time. And if you don't get everybody, your triad, your residents, your families, and your staff, to the end of that month with everybody achieving the deliverables together as a unit, you go back to the beginning and you do it all over again. And dining, I will tell you, is one of the most challenging things to change. From that dining being served from a servery, you know, every meal is like restaurant style. It comes plated out of a servery and put in front of you, to sitting at a table where you have prepared some of the food. You serve yourself, you serve your neighbor, you might be sitting beside the housekeeper, you share that meal together, no different than your family. That is very, very hard to do. And when you say the first time to a staff member, to a housekeeper, please sit down and have lunch with us. We're having lunch now. Absolutely not. I'm going to get in trouble. I'm going to lose my job if I do that. I can't eat that food. I can't sit. I have to be working. No, your job is to sit. We want you to sit. We want you to eat. We want you to engage. That is a really hard paradigm shift that has to happen. I think when people come into long-term care, they that's the way they want to work with their residents. They want to provide care, but that quickly gets taken away with a number of, with the rules and sort of regulations that are in place. We want you to sit with the resident. A really quick story here. We had a resident who would not stay in bed. Sometimes with dementia, you will go to bed, but you won't stay in bed for the night, and you need to have a good sleep for that restorative sleep. So our staff at night wear pajamas, because when you come out of your room at night and you might be looking for the bathroom or something, if you saw somebody dressed in a uniform with the lanyard with keys and phones and all sorts of things hanging all over. That can be pretty frightening. But so our staff are, again, they're part of the family, the home action team. They wear their pajamas and their bathrobes at night. And for one resident, the staff member needed to get into bed with that resident and just hold that resident tight until she fell asleep. And then, would get up and continue with the rest of their work for the night. But again, for that staff member, and it was on the care plan for us to say, we want you to actually lay down with that resident. We didn't have to give that resident sedatives, sleeping pills to go to bed. No, we just needed to have that comfort and that security and to feel safe, to be able to go to sleep and then stay to sleep. And then the next day is a whole lot better. But for a staff member to say that to a staff member, it's like, no, that would be considered assault. You'll call the police. I'll lose my job. We have to turn that thinking around, and that is really, really, really tough, which is why this takes a lot of time. But I guess the bottom line to all of this is it's worth it. For any comments that I've made tonight about how difficult this is, it's worth every single ounce of that energy and every single resource that you've put into this, because when you see the transformation and you see the change, it's beyond words. And I struggle to describe it. And Jermaine Elliott, who is a friend of mine, and she is a member of the Indigenous community, when I was describing this to her, Jermaine gave me the word for this. And she said, Jill, you're describing spirit. That's the spirit that you're talking about. I stopped when she was, I was just dead stop when she said that to me. And I said, Jermaine, you're absolutely right. So I continue to describe it as the spirit, because it really defies any other words that I may be able to use to tell you what it feels like in a butterfly home area. So then let's talk about design really quickly here. Key principles: shape enhances the model of care. It normalizes living. It dedicates a self-managed team, so our home action team, to live and work with residents as a family. Safety, it can compartmentalize the community. It's efficient. We cluster households in the campus design, and it maximizes technology. So this is what we started with. This lovely beige, very clean, very sterile looking, but this is what our home area looked like. And this is our front door now. So every household has a front door. So you have a unique front door, and so you know where you go because you look for your front door. You come into a vestibule, right? We always have a place. We put our boots, we can put our umbrellas, we can hang our coats, put up our backpacks. This is a little spot at the end of our corridor, so you can start to see the colors. You can see all the stuff. That's called stuff of life. And I'd like to point out the plants in particular. Butterfly, again, remember I talked about outdoor areas, natural access to nature. In a butterfly home, nothing is artificial. All the plants are real. And again, it's about balancing risk. We're not worried about, we've bought all these plastic plants for years because we thought people would eat the plants. And nobody has eaten the plant yet. People water the plants. People, deadhead the flowers. People do all sorts of things that they're supposed to do with the plants, but nobody's eating the plants because we don't eat plants. People know that. So everything is real. And so this is just a nice little area at the end of one of our corridors, one of our hallways. Oops, sorry. And this is our lounge. So remember, this is a home that's existing now, and we had to retrofit it. So this isn't a custom built, but this is a retrofit. And you can see we broke the lounge into smaller areas. And this little spot right here, this is the desk, and we have a resident who was a secretary. And so you can see her typewriter. It's a manual typewriter because she didn't have a computer or whatever, and that she types away. And we had a resident that would like to take phone messages, and so it was always on the pink little message sheets, and she would roll up the messages and put them in the pigeonholes. And she was busy, she was active, and she was busy, and she had a darn good day, and she felt quite fulfilled in her day. And this is our dining. So instead of the single person, the 4-person tables, people sit together at a family style dining. And remember, our staff sit with our residents to eat. And then in this photo, you can see the resident is so this is one of our staff members, and the resident is serving herself. So everything isn't plated, right? Things go on the table. People have often worked to make the meals as well. So we don't just have everything served that's prepared. We make our meals. just like a normal household. And this is one of our residents having a cup of tea. We don't have, meals that you're at 8 o'clock for breakfast and 12 o'clock for lunch and 5 o'clock for dinner. Breakfast may be from 8 till 10:30 because you know what, we're reading a book and we are looking at the paper, and you might have a friend at the table to chat with. And everybody has their own front door. We work with the resident if they're capable or with their family, and they select the front door. So if you're able to find something, if you've got something you can bring in that we can use to create a front door that's something that's familiar to you, we can do that. Or we have a catalog of doors, and typically the family and the resident together will pick the front door. And so, I always say, like, how interesting, when you go down the hall, it's just not these beige doors, but I'm going to look for the blue door because that's where I know I go. I don't look for room 109B. I look for my door because I know where I'm going, and that door means something to me. And everything is real. So this is one of our plant stands. We've been working, this is actually a very recent photo. We've been working at bringing our plants in from outside because the days are getting shorter and getting cooler. So we brought our plants inside, and we continue to work with our plants. And remember, everything is real. This is our sports wall. Got lots of stuff, got some maple leaf fans there. And then this is one of our staff members. They're just playing the organ here. And again, the plants, checking the plants. This lovely woman is not eating the plants, she's checking them, and so everything is real. And I wanted to put this slide in so you could see the colors. So the colors mean something. So pink, blue, purple, green, very vibrant. So with dementia, we know, and with older adults, you need to see color deeper. So 5 to 7 shades deeper on a color wheel. And that's why the colors are so vivid and so vibrant. And the sequencing of the colors are important, are really, really important. So again, I know I belong in the pink area, or I know I need to get down to that green area. Again, it helps with cueing, it anchors, and those colors are important, and they actually, they mean something. And this is just another one of our residents, and they're just hanging up clothes. They've done some laundry, and they're just hanging clothes on the clothesline. You can see how vibrant the colors are again. And then here they're just peeling the corn for dinner. Again, we prepare our vegetables. We work on preparing our food for our meals, and in our gardens we grow food. So our tomatoes made a lot of tomato sauce this year. And this is just, I had to put this photo in because this is just one of my most favorite photos. This lovely couple, the male resident is actually, or the gentleman is actually our resident, and his wife comes regularly. And this means a lot in terms of the fullness, or that spirit of the home area. It requires the presence of our families. So again, when we had to exclude our families, it was really challenging for us. And I think that's why as well some of the staff satisfaction dropped away during those peak COVID months. So non-negotiables then for Butterfly, just quickly, small domestic households, no greater than 16 or less. Everybody has their own unique front door and their identity. A household works best when it's matched. So you want to try to put people together with similar needs, with similar culture, for example, with similar interests. Again, when you put people together with opposing interests or differing interests, it can create sort of a toxic brew and not really giving person home care a chance. And safe and culturally appropriate and matched. Usable kitchens. You have to have usable kitchens. They're domestic kitchens because we prepare our own food, and we don't always prepare our own food because it's exactly 5 o'clock. We might get to that dinner at 6 o'clock, or we may want to have a bowl of cereal at 4:30 in the afternoon. The food has to be available and in a domestic approach so that we work on it and prepare it, and the food cues you for when you want to eat. Living rooms that balance active and soothing places, laundries that are functional and accessible, because that's part of domestic living. Heightened color, I've already talked about the vibrancy and the energy, and also sections of color to break up household areas and draw focal points. Engaging walls, you can see the stuff of life in those photos that I showed you, personalized bedroom doors, and filling up the environment. So we ask families, when a resident moves in, we say, bring everything you got, bring all the stuff of life. And if we don't get enough stuff, we have the most amazing staff. They are on Kijiji, they're out at Goodwill, they're at yard sales, they're bringing stuff from their own families and their own homes in to make it a real household. And open shelving to create interest, and not just having to go through a door. If you have to go through a door into a dining room, you may not know that that's the dining room. So just using interesting dividers and shelving, etc., to sort of segregate spaces, but make it open and so that you can see it and you know what you should be doing in that area. No nursing stations. So nursing stations, I call them command centers. You don't need them. What you need is a room for our staff to have the things that they need, the tools to do their jobs, and to have a place to have their report and meet with their team members. But we don't need nursing stations. I can't imagine if I was a resident and I was looking at a command center all day. And typically, if you look at design, the nursing stations are in the most prime piece of real estate on a home area, usually right in the center. That's where all the activity and where your people should be living together, and not being housed, not housing that command station, that nursing station. So concealed communication and medication rooms. All service doors are disguised. Photos of family members, staff, and residents on the walls. They're just beautiful photos on the walls of the people who live in the household. Access to natural outdoor areas, and I've already talked to you about 12 months a year, and reducing the use of antipsychotic medications to 10% or less. Themes on walls, so linked to people's past lives. So we have a Hawaii wall in one of our homes. It's amazing. And the staff put that together and work with the families and the residents to do that, because that was a place that a resident liked to visit. So they like to go to the Hawaii wall because it means something to them. We remove all of them and us features, okay? So not a lot of notices and stuff posted all over the place. Again, the staff eat with the residents. If it was true butterfly, we would likely be sharing washrooms. Now we do have a staff washroom, but I've seen that particularly in England. Trolleys and carts get a domestic facelift, so it's not a traditional looking med cart. It looks, in fact, in one home it's a tiki cart. And staff wear clothing that's personal and adds engagement. So at night they wear pajamas, they wear street clothes during the day, and we balance stimulating areas with soothing areas. And now here's the big piece, is the new culture staffing approach with ratios of 1 to 5. This is really important, but remember, when you're looking at that ratio of 1 to 5, it's all staff. It's like a universal care provider approach, because you're all part of the household. So just because I'm the housekeeper doesn't mean I know anything less about that resident than the PSW or the registered staff. In fact, I may know more. I may be the closest care provider to that particular resident. Outcomes. Region of Peel did a 1-year pilot study, dropped those antipsychotic drugs from 41% down to 12.5%. We went from 57 down to 8. Decrease in resident falls, reduction in full-time equivalent staff incidental sick time, and other unexpected outcomes, such as increase in doll therapy, reduction in hospitalization, and a reduction in food waste. And for our experience, we had a reduction in pain from 15% to 5%. We had 0 responsive behaviors. We had increased social engagement. We had a 40% weight gain, and 0 use of nutritional supplements. And I know with the Region of Peel's work that they've done, I've been able to quantify that, and that worked out to about $125,000. And you don't need supplements because food is readily available. It's part of our day to prepare food, and then we eat together, and we eat better, and people have weight gain. And sometimes we don't want all that weight gain, but people do well. Again, the antipsychotic medications, and for families, we measure their well-being using the Hope Hearth Index, and we showed improved hope with families. They leave with confidence that their family member is well cared for, nurtured, and their well-being is the most important. Our advocacy then needs to be around reevaluating funding models for residents with dementia to ensure that funding matches staff resources for resident care needs. Again, if we learned anything through COVID, that was the big point. Providing funding to build staff competencies related to person-centered emotional care. not just focusing on physical care, but focusing on emotional care. And ensuring the ministry long-term care inspections include outcomes related to emotional well-being, not just focusing on outputs, but focusing on true outcomes. Investing in supportive structural design of long-term care homes, including the redevelopment of older homes to improve quality of life, including person-centered emotional care and post-secondary curriculums, building capacity within the long-term care homes professional staff using hub and spoke models, linking Butterfly Homes together as an expert resource to support other homes to get on this emotion-focused care journey. And again, we have with the few homes that have made this transition in Ontario, we have been able to establish a community of practice supported by Meaningful Care Matters. And this is where you really work together and you support one another, because it's not about us or them, it's about all of us together being person-centered and really believing in these core principles. So what will Springwater look like? It will be a bespoke Butterfly home, and it will look like this. It will look very different. This is about 10 acres. These are the small households. Okay, so there you can see the tiny little households. This is the health hub, so this is where the adult day services will be, and you can see all the green space, and there are no interior courtyards. So lots of opportunity. This is fencing, but lots of opportunity to be outside and to move around in nature. And again, each one of the little households has a small dining room for the household, has its own laundry, has its own living area, and no loops, right? Loops are dangerous. So pathways, again, you could start here. You might be able to get all the way over here. With that color blocking, it anchors you. It gives you a focal point to where you need to be. So it's safe. You feel confident. I know I belong in the pink area, so I'm just working my way over there. But you have a great opportunity to socialize along the way, to get exercise, and to live in a more normal way than being just sort of stuck. Remember that photo I showed you with that beige corridor? I mean, you don't know where it starts and where it ends, right? So you can find where you need to be. And these are the lovely little households that people will live in. And with that, we say this is home. This is Emmanuel. Emmanuel's 104 years old, and he lives in our home in London, and we have pets. And I'm happy to take your questions now.
Can I applaud?
That is Butterfly.
First of all, Jill, I get more excited every time I hear something about this, so it's just wonderful. Just a great idea, and I hope it takes off. So we did get a couple of good questions on Facebook. I'll tell you a couple of comments from John Tom, our host from Superior Home Health here. He said, it's a beautiful lounge, and having tables of more than 4 residents makes for a better community, which is absolutely true.
Yeah.
We did receive a couple of questions from Albert, and a couple of them were answered throughout the thing, but so I'll jump in. So he was wondering what the staff retention level throughout the transition period, what did that look like? Because you were saying how difficult it is to go from that different culture to the new Butterfly model. So how did the staff take it?
So that's an excellent question, Albert. Thank you for that. It is very challenging for people. It challenges, I mean, everything that we know about what we do every day. It's not just a shift in thinking, it's a whole paradigm that has to shift. And it is very stressful. And I'll tell you, we go through that journey together. We do lose some staff, but maybe just going to other areas in the home and not in a Butterfly household, because they, again, it's just not the place for them. And that's okay. Like, that doesn't make you wrong or bad. That's just not the right place. But it's really an emotional journey with staff as well. When we start at month 1 to where we are at month 12 is very, very different. Even how we open up and how we support one another. Initially, it's very closed. People don't want to talk a lot. People kind of look at the coach or the mentor before they, you know, sort of, is it safe for me to say something? But by the time we get into the 3rd and 4th month, people really open up, and you begin to learn. Again, when you're relating to people with with emotional, on an emotional level. It can be a very vulnerable time, and so people learn to support one another, and that's where really month 3, 4, 5 is really, you see people stop being sort of staff or team members, and that family start to form, right? You really start to rely on, like, similar to your own family. Probably around halfway through, maybe between month 6 and 8, it gets really, really, really tough. And even me, with a great program manager, Janet Lakey, great leadership teams, great staff involved, could have thrown the towel in. I could have said, this is not worth it. I can't take another minute of this. I just want to go back to what we were doing. But the group together pulls you through, and you realize this is worth it, and we just have to put our heads down and problem solve. And we did that, and I'll tell you, it's like you hit a wall somewhere around month 6 to 8, and everybody seems to go through it. Each project we've done, our teams have gone through that. But we have to get over that hump. We increase our coaching sessions. We increase our in-home area mentoring. We maybe do some recharge education through that. There's a lot of time that the staff are away from the home area, working together and learning together. So learning and turning. And so again, it's a big investment for the staff in that. But once you move through those difficult points, I think if you ask the staff now, they'd say, we don't want to go back to that place we were in before. I will tell you, in one of our homes, we did dining 3 times, 3 months in a row. We kept repeating the same stuff until we got that dining right. It was tough. It's tough, and it's easy to say, I'm giving up. But again, the group together forms a family, and you leave no man behind, right? You leave no man behind. And as we form that family, that expands with our residents and our families, and that's the triad of care, and that triad is person-centered. So our families provide as much support as we support them, as we together support the residents. It's mutual, right?
Right, great. I'm actually really curious. I'm going to ask you one of my
Sure.
own questions, because I was listening, and it's you were talking about how different it is to have the families involved, and the staff members know so much about the residents. Mm-hmm. How do they get to know, like, is it just something that they generally get to know them as they're living there for a while, or is there something that you do that's different when in the beginning to get everybody to know each other?
Yes, exactly. So even though these are existing homes that have existing residents we're transforming culture, there's a number of, again, we partnered with Meaningful Care Matters as our partner and coach through this transformation. There's a number of tools that we use to learn about our residents. Families complete some of them, we complete some of them, we work together on some of them, and we look at the resident different from just physical, nutritional, medications, whatever. We really want to get to the essence of who you are as a person. So there's a number of tools that are used to do that. And yes, you do that early. And as those care plans begin to transform from tasks and behaviors don't define who you are, to what we call strength-based care plans, there's a lot of work that goes into learning about a person. I mean, we've just revealed such interesting things about people's lives. We had one resident who was a spy in the a British spy in World War II, and she was in behind the German lines, and she wanted to only speak German, drink German wine, and eat German food. And if she didn't do that, she was very suspicious. She maybe wouldn't eat because that's where she was at in her journey, right? That was her life. And so once we used virtual reality to take her to Berlin. And once we were able to do that, and we related to her where she was at in her journey, she became much more comfortable. But we wouldn't know that about her. We probably would have given her medication for her paranoia, right? We didn't know that about her. So a lot of really interesting lives we learn a lot about people's lives, and it doesn't have to be something as significant or dramatic as that example. We had one particular resident, a family I remember, called and said, my mother hasn't talked in over a year, and I was shocked. I came to visit and she's talking about the cows. And I said, oh, well, that's because we go to the farm every day with virtual reality. We go to the dairy farm and we use virtual reality for that. And they said, well, we had a dairy farm. That's what she did. And I said, yes, we know. And that's why she goes to the dairy farm. And she started talking after a year of being nonverbal.
And that really plays into what you're saying about having the cultural households.
Right.
And the benefits of that, because there's a lot of people who have a different first language that might have lost English as their second language through.
You try to match the households, and that's why it lends itself so well to cultural groups.
That's great. So Albert also asked, what has PrimaCare learned from the spring outbreak that will help mitigate the second wave? Did you get any tricks that?
Yes. So I'll tell you, Albert, the one thing that we learned is not to stop touching people. So, people did go into their rooms. There was confinement. There certainly was tray service in the rooms, and certainly that's the required approach. And if someone, if we did have COVID, people had to be isolated, et cetera. And we follow all the rules and regulations around that and directives around that. But the one thing that we learned, and I could have brought more photos to show you, but was to not stop touching people. Human touch is necessary for all of us. And so I've got some photos even of our staff in gowns and masks and gloves, in actually touching a resident, holding hands, giving a great big hug. And in fact, one of our PSWs, Lisa, I wish I had a broader photo. She's in our London home, Lisa. She's our home action team leader, PSW. And I have a photo of Lisa hugging a resident. Lisa's in all her personal protective equipment and hugging a resident. And the resident sort of stepped back and you could see was really visibly moved by that. And Lisa said, I needed that as much as you did.
Wonderful.
So Albert, not to stop touching people.
That's great. Shell was wondering, worldwide, how long has one of these homes been going?
So in England, these have been going since the 90s. So Dr. David Sheard founded the butterfly model in the 90s, and it really came out of his frustrations and concerns as well as a healthcare provider for some of the things that he was being instructed to do as a young practitioner. Not to sit on a patient's bed, not to cry with the patient. If somebody gets a cancer diagnosis, don't cry with them. Be stoic. Don't cross that professional barrier with anybody. He tells his story that it really played with his mental health, and he said the day he walked out of that hospital was the best day of his life, and he didn't know what he was, and he was the chief of the hospital. He'd worked his way up, and he walked out because he said he couldn't take it any longer. And he goes on to say that he didn't know what he was going to do, but he knew he was going to do something different. And that's what really founded the Butterfly. So early in the 90s. And so there's some very established butterfly homes in the UK. So not just in England, but in Ireland as well, that one of my colleagues has actually had an opportunity to go and to go and visit.
Great. Perspective makes such a big difference.
Yes.
Yeah. And John was wondering, how does the current provincial government view the butterfly model, and will you be seeking to manage additional homes in this model?
Yes, so we have a number of applications in for new developments that will be bespoke butterfly models and or butterfly homes, I should say. So in this type of design with the small households, certainly we've had a lot of opportunity to speak to government and to provide briefing notes and presentations, etc. I think there's a lot of support and understanding for the model. I do also think that there are people that don't quite understand it, and those are the folks that we need to work on, and we need to really get their thinking turned in this regard. Really, again, I think this is an opportunity for I speak to the bureaucrats and I speak to the politicians about this. This is really an opportunity for Ontario to step out as a global leader in care of older adults and in dementia care, but doing what we're doing now and approaching it with this rear view mirror approach is not showing leadership.
Yeah.
So again, this is a huge opportunity. So when I said earlier where, people aren't traveling to Ontario to see our long-term care offerings, wouldn't that be wonderful? Wouldn't that be the measure of success when the eyes of the world really are on us and the amazing work that we're doing? And I don't want to call it innovation because this should not be innovation. This should just be standard, acceptable, regular ongoing practice in long-term care. This should be the long-term care offering.
Absolutely. And COVID has so shown us that something needs to be different.
So interestingly, we have COVID and we didn't do very well. So what we were doing, like to me, I put those pieces together and logically it says,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And our friend Gwen was wondering, she wanted to learn a little bit more about pets in the home.
Okay, so pets are really important to any household, and residents are welcome to bring their pets. In fact, in our Henley House home in St. Catharines, some of the little dogs live right in the residents' rooms, and they have they're called pee-pee pads, and family are really good about organizing for supports. Again, our families are with us, so organizing supports to take the dogs out for walks, etc. But pets are welcome. We have birds, we've had bunnies, we've had cats, we've had dogs, we've had cats just get right in the bed and sleep with. They just know which bed to get in.
So it's the residents that have the pets, not necessarily the
we have
household?
birds, we've had cats,
Okay.
and we've had residents coming with their dogs. And this
Great.
example I just gave was actually, it was a real example of one of the pets at in our Henley House home in St. Catharines, and the dog just lived in the room
Nice.
with their best friends.
Yeah.
Right? You can't separate that.
Great.
Mm-hmm.
So Shell has another question. Are you able to offer the butterfly level of care for the same price as current facilities? And was also wondering how many households, like if you said 16 people per
Yep,
household,
yep.
how many households are in a complex or in your model?
Okay, so that's a good question. So yes, the rates for long-term care, because these are licensed beds, are set by the province, and so it doesn't matter if you live up north in Thunder Bay, for example, you pay the same rate as you would if you were down in Winton. It doesn't matter. So it's the same rate across the province. So yes, this fits well within the current funding model, and we're demonstrating that right now because we're operating butterfly home areas within our funding levels right now. And I'm sorry, the second part of the question was?
There's 16 people per
Yep,
household.
yep.
How many households would be in your one?
So again, it depends on the size. So this is going to be a 192 bed home, but the homes are different sizes: 160 beds, 128 beds. So it depends on the size of the home, and you just divide that by 16, and that gives you the number of households. So when you work with the architect, if you've got 192 beds that you're building, then you would be making 12 households.
Okay, fantastic. So that's all the questions that we've gotten. So I'll give some thanks, maybe. Time for that. So we wanted to say thank you so much to 5 Points Media, John Ironside and Tiffany Smith, and Michael Enterprises. So Stephen Michael and the technicians Sam De Silva and Dave Thompson. And Gwen wants to say a couple of more words, I believe.
I just wanted to say thank you, Jill, for coming all this way and for doing this. I was in love with the butterfly effect when I first heard about it, and then after meeting with you in March, I am so happy to have this opportunity to show the residents of Barrie and area what we can look forward to. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Gwen. Really, this has just been a tremendous pleasure for me. And thank you to CARP Chapter 36 for organizing this tonight and for all the supports. It's really an opportunity to get the message out, to inspire other people to think differently, and to, we work together. We consider ourselves a team with Butterfly, and any way we can help anybody with this. And I'm hoping, again, through this opportunity to talk to CARP tonight, is that people can see that this is achievable, that this isn't a goal that's unattainable, that people are doing this now. You just have to put your head down and put the effort into it, and like I said, it's worth it. It's absolutely worth it.
Absolutely. I get more excited every time. I think I already said that, but
And people who missed out tonight will still be able to see it on YouTube and streaming on Facebook.
yeah.
That's great.
That's great, and we'll keep spreading the word and keep promoting the concept, and we can hopefully all be butterflies eventually.
I love that. We are butterfly,
Yes.
right? Exactly. I love that. Thank you, everyone. Have a
Thank
good
you.
evening.
Have a good evening.
Excellent. Now, that's gonna be up for a long time and people are gonna find out a lot. Did you turn it?
Is it?